A big part of my career has been looking at the therapeutic value of the 12 steps because the 12 steps really have harnessed some powerful psychological forces that creates an amazing change in our life. What is that change? Well, the truth is that the 12 steps are engineered to help us achieve emotional sobriety, to achieve true independence of spirit, to achieve autonomy, to learn how to take care of ourselves. These are things that we don't know. Emotional sobriety really helps us learn how to have a healthy relationship, how to have union with the preservation of our integrity, how to cooperate with integrity. Most of us get lost in our relationships. Most of us do a lot of things we don't want to do. We don't really know how to show up in a good way. Emotional sobriety is about learning to have healthy relationships. Well, without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Nutshell Wisdom, the one and the only, Thom Rutledge.
Hey,
How about that intro? Did you like that?
I like it. I wish there were a drum roll, maybe a little bit of maybe Doc Severson, playing me on, something like that. It would have been great. It's like
here's Johnny. Here's Johnny.
I want to start off by just quoting Howard. So I have a tendency to go, I love it. It's just as soon as he said that, I identified. I go, I have the same tendency to go, It's like, what it brings up for me is actually something I actually have notes. And one of my notes was having something to do with what Howard just said, which is he's talking about the little things. It's like very often we think about life on life's terms, which is what we're talking about, chapter 9 in your book. And I've got some random thoughts of my own and some points I want to make. Want to bullet point from your book, but it's like, I think very often we think of this stuff in terms of the big things, and Alan, and I'll say this to everybody else. One of the things that Alan talks about in this chapter, and I'll leave it for him to talk about it, because it's a wonderful description and a heart-wrenching story, I think. It is a big thing that has to do with coming to terms with living life on life's terms. So what I want to do as we get started is just talk about the idea of daily practice. The truth is these little corny trite things we say in the 12-step program are corny and trite because because they're so wise and we keep saying them. And one of them is, it works if you work it. And this is something that I'm always learning more about. And I think I can honestly say over the last 4 years of this group, I have learned more about this in practice than I have in all the entire years of my recovery and personal growth combined before that. And that is that, part of living life on life's terms is being sure that we are paying attention to the material that we're gathering as we do this, whether it be our own introspection and personal journey, or whether it be coming together like this and learning from each other, that kind of stuff. But the idea there is our job is to find what fits for us. Don't assume everything fits for everybody. Even don't settle for my words or Alan's words or Roger's words or Herb's words. Make it your own, and put it into practice, and really be very specific about how you can practice that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how that best thing I can do is share experience, strength, and hope, and talk about how I do that for myself. But I think I really want to make a point of is so often, and I'm saying this, I've noticed this in other people or people I work with, stuff like that, but there's nothing I'm saying I've noticed in other people that I haven't done myself, is the so often we can nod and say amen to lots of these things, say I get it, that's right, I got to do that, we got to remember that, and then we forget it. It's we don't, sort of like going to church on Sunday and then you just kind of go back out to your life. But it's like we need to be able to live life on life's terms. We needed that daily practice. We need a design. There's in one of my favorite daily reader things is a book called The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday, and today's reading is I'll read a piece of it from you. It begins with a quotation from Seneca. Life without a design is erratic. As soon as one is in place, principles become necessary. I think you'll concede that nothing is more shameful than uncertain and wavering conduct and beating a cowardly retreat. And he goes on to talk about that. And what Ryan Holiday takes that and says is I love this line: cowardice is a design problem. It makes a lot of sense. And what I started thinking about with this was, what we want to do with living life on life's terms. We want to live brave. We want to be courageous, and I can honestly say for you, to you about myself, is much of the time, that's one area where I for my own assessment, I come up short, that I'm not living with as much courage as I would like. I have a friend. Some of you may be familiar with her. A friend who's a songwriter and a speaker, and I'm here in Nashville. Been here forever. Done amazing stuff. But she has a song called "If I Were Brave," and I just love the song itself. Just asks the question: what would you do today if you were brave? And there's a couple of things about that I always like to point out. I like the question. I like precise language, and I like the question because it doesn't say, "Are you brave?" It doesn't say you got to be brave. It simply asks a hypothetical question to give us some more information. What would you do today if you were brave? And bring that to mind. And I love that. I think that, and ever since I heard that song from Jana Stanfield's her name, is that's been a part of my daily practice. It's like, asking that question, what would I do today if I were brave? And so my thinking on this is I got started with that, began with my morning reading, and with the idea that cowardice is the opposite of what I want to be living my life with. I want to be facing things head on. I want to be brave. And in order to do that, is what Seneca's comment there is, that as soon as you do this, you have to have principles. What I think is you need a belief system. And I've talked about belief system before. I have maybe even recently I've talked about my friend Bendel, who died just a few years ago. Wonderful, weird, and very wise person, who taught me this simple thing, which is beliefs are choices, is what he would say. The point he was making was beliefs do not have to be objective truths. If I choose to believe something, I don't have to push it down anybody else's throat. I do not need to become a fundamentalist believer and decide everybody needs to believe what I believe, because it's absolutely true. And I think a lot of us in this group know, as we get older, for particular it's like, we become, we get that humility that comes with age, which is, when I was 25, I knew everything. And now that I'm 70, as Howard would say, I don't know much. So that comes with that. But we need we get to choose our belief system because it gives us direction. It is a design. So that when Ryan Holiday in this book says cowardice is a design problem, the design is the belief. And I'm just going to use my, you could do it. You can do multiple beliefs. You can mix and match, but I like simple. So I choose a belief about life. I always begin by saying I have no idea how the universe works. I've had ideas through the years. I've sometimes thought, when I was younger, I thought I knew things about. Now I know it's wide open. I don't know, but I can choose things that I believe because these belief systems work for me. And so one of the things I believe about the human condition really is that I choose to believe that we are here to learn. And with that belief as a choice, it's not saying I think there's somebody some being in the universe who decided that that's what it is. I just think that's a good belief system for me, because if I'm here to learn, then teachers are everywhere. There are lessons available to me every day, all over the place, and anybody can be a teacher, even people who are, and maybe especially people who are giving a shit. The guy who laid on his horn, yesterday morning when I thought I was doing a perfectly good job of merging into traffic, but he just didn't like the idea that I was going to be in front of him in traffic, I think, and just, and it's like, and I was surprised that I found myself at first hurt by that. I identified the feeling, and then started to get pissed off and kind of remembering my old road rage days, before I went through the process of letting that whole thing go, because I was telling somebody about it later, and I said, because I'll never see that man again. And then I realized I've never seen that man at all. All I saw was his truck and heard his horn. So it's like, the truth is that man doesn't need to mean anything to me. And so that's a good example of, he was my teacher yesterday morning. If I can understand that, then I can change that to gratitude and genuine gratitude. Thank you for the opportunity to in this case, because my wife used to call me God of the highway, and she would say, she would say, if these people knew who you were, I'm sure they would pull you over and ask your opinion and get your advice, and it's like, yeah, okay, thank you so much. But that, so it was, we're recovery one day at a time. That's one of the many things that's on my list of things I'm recovering from. I was reminded of that yesterday morning. That was my teacher. So if I'm here to learn, then the world is full of teachers, and I want to be able to use that as a system for moving through my life. And in that way, I can get to the place where I get to Alan's chapter title here, which is Living Life on Life's Terms. Alan starts off with in the chapter with talking about letting go of expectations, which is so much the essence of what we talk about here with emotional sobriety. And he talks about the conscious expectations and the unconscious expectations, which has been extremely powerful for me to think in terms of those things, because there are lots of those things we can know. We can just say, I tend to have that expectation that the world, the broad strokes, I do tend to want and even expect that the world is gonna respond the way I want it to. It's like, okay, we get that, but the more nuanced work, the harder work is in some of the stuff I think Alan was referencing a minute ago. But it's like, the idea is when, and Bill says it in the letter exactly. He doesn't say, when, I can't remember the exact words, but he's basically not saying, when you're distressed, you might want to look and see, because it's possible that you have an unrealistic expectation. He doesn't say that at all. He says when we're distressed, we have unrealistic expectations. And so we need to look in those terms. I'm a big believer for being wide open and curious and looking and not jumping to conclusions. But I haven't found it an exception to that rule since I've really internalized that piece of the information, which is, unrealistic expectations are what caused distress, I've not found an exception to the rule. It's like because basically that brings us down to living life on life's terms. It basically means that we have to have a willingness to face. Here's the way I think about it. We have a willingness and hopefully an increasing ability to face uncertainty and unexpected changes. And I've probably said this before, but it's one of the things I came away from spending a year writing my book, Embracing Fear. You spend Alan, you spend the time writing the book, and it's not like you knew everything there was to know. You were the expert and you want to write the book. It's like by the time you finish writing the book, you spent whatever, a year or so, with this subject matter, and you end up feeling like you know so much more about it because you spent quality time with the subject. And that's the way I felt about fear. And I don't even think this is in the book, because I think I came away with this awareness, is that as human beings, we fear uncertainty more than we fear anything. I heard a comedian one time, might have been Jerry Seinfeld, talk about that we fear public speaking more than we fear death. So that means if we're at a funeral, we would rather be in the coffin than reading the eulogy. It's like I'm not sure if my fear of public speaking is that bad, but what we need to be able to do is understand that we're talking about acceptance, radical acceptance in terms of the idea of, like, it's not like, oh, I need to do this a little bit better, or I need to have a better attitude about these things. It's like the truth is there are, as far as what I was saying about the uncertainty, the uncertainty, we're scared to death of that, and we hate change. So we fear uncertainty more than anything, and we hate change. And the punchline to that is the only thing that's certain about life is change, right? And so, therefore, we are the only species on the planet that lives in fear of the nature of life. That's what we do with our big human brains. It's like, and I'd love the idea that a lot of this work, I've thought this ever since I've been in around 12-step programs. And I don't think it has a corner on the market, but it's a wonderful way to do it. And certainly with emotional sobriety, this is about streamlining the way I'm living my life. This is the way of, it actually begins or centers around the serenity prayer, because the serenity prayer, and really, if you look at the whole, I could make the argument for the whole 12-step program, but the serenity prayer is a system. It's a system of energy efficiency. What does it say? It says, find out where you are investing energy in things that you don't have a chance in hell of changing, divest that energy, and reinvest it in some of those things that you can actually do something about, which are usually quite simple things, and divesting the energy from things we cannot change is often the hardest work, because we've got those little guys on our committee inside that just, for me anyway, that just wants to go, no, let me try this just one more time. I think I said this recently. It's like, I go, I haven't run at that brick wall from a 42-degree angle yet. So let me try that. And, we'll try that, as blood drips down my face. So, but the idea being that, all of the work we're doing, emotional sobriety is about simplifying, and it's about bringing, streamlining, so that we can approach this and find out, what does it actually mean to live life on life's terms? And what it really means is to fully accept the fact that Alan talks about this a lot, that tomorrow is not going to be a copy and paste of today. It's like, it's easy to think that because a lot of things repeat in our lives. But what we need to know, we need to remind ourselves not to freak ourselves out. We need to remind ourselves just to prepare, just to be prepared that unexpected things are going to happen. Things that are difficult for us are going to happen, and those are not the exceptions to the rule. Those are not the things where it's like, okay, well, now I'm taking a break from my life while I'm freaking out about this. No, this is my life, and certainly those of us who are on a personal growth path, it's like, that's I'll do one of my other things I repeat a lot, which is, anybody can have a good day on a good day. It's like, and please have as many good days as you can and enjoy the hell out of them. But the places where we learn are the places where we hit the bumps or where we run into to the obstacles, and we decide how we're going to do that stuff. It's so part of living life on life's terms. To me, the reframe of that is I'm here to do that. Those are not, when things don't go my way, those are not things that are interferences in my life. Those are my life. That's what's going on. So the idea, and Alan and I've been talking about this, Alan and Patrick and I, on our podcast, we all three been beat up. Alan's got the hip replacement difficulty going on. I've just come through cancer treatment, and Patrick, he's young, so he didn't have any of that stuff, so he just fell off a cliff. And and messed himself up that way. But we've been talking about that the idea is this isn't something that our life is now on hold while we get through it, and then we get back to our life. Although I can tell you there have been many times in this process for me that I felt that way and I wanted to do that, but the reminder needs to keep coming back. And sometimes it comes from me, sometimes it comes from support people that know I need to hear this, is that no, this is what your life is today, and this is what you need to face it exactly as it is. And it doesn't mean again, we always talk about acceptance in this group. It doesn't mean it, like we say about acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean you agree with it or you like it. And living life on life's terms doesn't mean you like it either. It's like, no, I don't like this at all. However, I'm basically the way I put it is I am learning and have learned to some degree, but I'm continuing to learn how not to be offended when things don't go my way, because that's the way I've acted. I've just acted offended. Like, how dare the universe, do this, act this way. It's like, no, it's like, again, I'm not so special. It's supposed to clear my obstacles away as I go through, because dealing with these obstacles is what my life is. It's where those are the teachers. Those are the lessons that I need to learn. I want to finish up with a couple things here. Is living life on life's terms. I'm thinking we need two things. More than two, sure, but I'm thinking of two tonight. We need tolerance. We need to have tolerance for discomfort and pain. We need to build that tolerance. Now many of us have had lives where we've been, we have to be careful about this, because many of us have too high a tolerance for pain, and when you come out of a traumatic childhood background, that kind of stuff. And so part of the work of therapy is bringing that down. But we do have to have a reasonable amount of tolerance for discomfort and pain, so that we can keep learning in the face of difficulty. And then we need something that I think a lot of us have a really hard time with, and that's we need confidence. It's like I think we get confidence mixed. Those of us who have low self-esteem, should monsters that talk to us, we get confidence mixed up with arrogance. To be confident doesn't mean I'm arrogant. It just simply means I believe in myself. It means I think I can do this. And the kind of confidence that I talk to people about more than anything is not confidence in one thing. Like, are you confident that you could do this thing? It's confident in what I'm saying, that I can face the unknown. Confidence that whatever happens, I'm going to be able to, along with my support system, not alone, not isolated, but along with the support system I have established, I have confidence that I will be able to figure it out. We'll figure it out. And I will get my way through this stuff. And I'm a big believer that we need to work ourselves to the place where it's not just we have a right to be confident, it's that we have a responsibility to become competent enough for us to have confidence, so that we can actually feel that strength that comes from that. So that if we deal with the inner child work, which ties into this a whole lot for me, where that little kid part of me is where the fear emanates from, and it's like for me to be able to say to that kid, it's okay, I got this. Now the idea is if he asked me, what exactly are you going to do? It's like, my answer is, I don't know yet, but I know that I got this, because I'm not going to stop until I do. I'm not going to, like, that's what I say to that little kid in me is basically, I'm never going to leave you, never doing that again. And I'm going to stay with you. And when we have a problem to solve, we're going to solve it. I'm going to solve it, because I'm not going to quit until I do. And we need that. That's courage to me. If I'm able to pull that off, then I'm living my life with being a little bit brave. So I'll stop there. Amen. Peace out.
Thank you, Thom. Let me get Roger in here and Alan back in here.
Hey, Roger.
Hey, Thom. All right. Well, first of all, I just need to acknowledge it's not easy to follow the former god of the highway. All right, in my presentation.
I understand. I get that.
It's
yeah.
not. I that bravery and courage you're talking about is it's a stretch right now, man. After meeting the former god of the highway in person, almost in the flesh, a couple thousand miles away, but almost in the flesh.
Yeah, pretty close.
Raj, the image that came to my mind was Road Warrior.
Oh God,
Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson. That's funny. That's funny.
That's great.
Wow, Thom, you packed a lot in that. I mean, a lot. Of, to me, fantastic information. I might actually sit down and listen to this one again on the website, on YouTube, because there was so much in there, man. I got tired of taking notes after a while, and I ran out of space on my page, because you touched on so many ideas that are part of living life on life's terms, that are very powerful and very important ideas, I think. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, you're a god. So anyway, so I'm
Bless you.
Thank you.
He's not going to let you live that down, Thom, is he? He's just not going to let up on that, is he?
I'm going to start with a little bit of a different tack, but there's room for that. Alan, when you start off chapter 9, Living Life on Life's Terms, you talk about expectations, as Thom mentioned. And one of the sentences you say is, our expectations are deeply woven into the fabric of our consciousness. And I'm going to expand on that, because I think it's important to have a realistic expectation regarding our ability to do away with our expectations. Okay, I want to say that again. I think it's important to have a realistic expectation about our ability to do away with our expectations. And what do I mean by that? Well, all I mean by that, because I agree with everything both you and Alan say, you guys, about how many problems for us in life our expectations create, especially when they reach the level of demands. toward life or toward other people or toward circumstances. But we really are wired, and Alan, you've mentioned this before, it's part of our nature to have expectations. I wouldn't try to go do anything in my life if I didn't believe that the first step I took, literally physically, the first step I took wouldn't be followed by the second one and the third one. I would never get in the car if I didn't have an expectation that the people coming straight at me are going to stay on their side of the road. Okay, I mean, those are mundane examples, but over and over again, our brain and we are wired to operate from expectations. The challenges are, to me, is to learn how to hold our expectations lightly. To learn how to hold our expectations lightly rather than gripping onto them for dear life, and to become more able with life and experience and pain and success at times, to be able to separate realistic expectations from unrealistic expectations more of the time. We'll never get great at it, at least I don't. But that's so I think of it more in terms of balance, like I talk about a lot, you know. To me, again, we are hardwired as mammals, particularly as mammals who are designed to be attached to their offspring and have offspring attached to us. We are designed to be disturbed. We are designed to be distressed when something really serious or harmful or damaging, or even the threat of that, comes to ourselves or comes to someone or something that we love. So that's not the kind of disturbance or distress that I give a lot of thought to. It's still a matter of degree. And if I'm too scared about that and too worried about that, I'm probably going to end up and have, as a still practicing helicopter parent in some ways, I'm going to do a fair amount of harm in that process, you know, conveying that anxiety that lies behind helicopter parenting to my son, right? So I want to make that distinction first, that we're going to have distress, we're going to be disturbed, and absolutely that's going to be because our expectations weren't met, right? But I don't want us to have this idea that, well, that's a bad thing. That's something that shouldn't have happened. That's something that means something's wrong with me. See, that's the kind of thinking I want to get away from. The kind of thinking I want to encourage is, yeah, this is happening for me. And now let me see, you know, what the reality of the situation is as best I can, having humility about that and trying to have some flexibility, like you talk about, Al, the ability to roll with the punches. I love what you said, you know, Thom, about the bumps are my life, right? The bumps in the road are my life. They're not something happening on the side of my life. So I'm totally on board with all of that. But the message I want to convey is, just because we're distressed, just because we're disturbed, and Alan, you say this often, doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me, doesn't mean there's anything wrong with life. It just means it's something for me to pay attention to and be curious about, like you guys were saying, to inquire about, okay, what is the reality of the situation? And then what you said is so important, Thom. Is it a reality that I can do anything about? Right? Is it a reality that I can influence in some way? So let me see if there's anything else I wanted to mention about that. The other thing I will say is, when something does happen that I'm disturbed about, it's certainly worth looking at my expectations. But it's also worth looking at accepting my disturbance, like you mentioned, rather than just trying to shoot past it because I think I shouldn't feel that way. And identifying, as Bill talks about, the emotional dependency that in all likelihood is underlying that. But if I'm not accepting the disturbance in the first place as part of my reality, like you said, if I'm just shooting right past it, and ignoring it, or as Howard said, in reading in reading parts of Bill Wilson's letter, I've already missed the first step. I've already missed the first step, which is first bringing in awareness to the reality of what I'm experiencing, bringing as much acceptance to that awareness as I can, noticing all the shoulds floating into my head, and just doing my best at that moment to accept the reality of those, but also to say, not right now. I'm just going to let myself be with what's going on for me, accept that as best I can, and then I'll see what's next. Okay.
That's a better description of the what I was talking about with tolerance. I think I appreciate that because the idea is, you know, the idea, because one of the biggest expectations we get in trouble with is we think everything's supposed to be cool. You know, it's no,
or for some of us, not cool. Okay, right. Like you say, there's no one answer for all of us. There's no one thing any of us suggest that's applicable to all of us in all situations. So that's all I wanted to share. So thank you again, Thom. So much, very rich, man, very rich. Alan.
Wow. So much is, you guys have sweetened the pot so much on this topic. I mean, a few things come to mind. I'll see if I can articulate them I'm so fatigued right now after traveling all day. So the first thing is that it is interesting when we step back, like you said, Raj, and not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're not talking about all expectations are bad. Is that, like you pointed out, we have to have a certain set of expectations. I remember a class I took on culture and personality. And one of the things that this author wrote about is that in every culture, there needs to be a set of what he called cognitive equivalencies, meaning that my mind, if we come to the stoplight, that you and I agree that red means that we're going to stop, so that we can have some kind of cooperation in our society, so that I don't pull up there and stop and you take red to mean go. I mean, or something like that. So we have to share, there has to be a certain set of shared expectations in order for this society to even have the ability, like the fellow that you quoted, Thom, if you don't have a design, you know, what are you going to have? You're going to have, you know, chaos, right? So we have to have these cognitive equivalencies. We have to be able to share some of the things. The problem comes in is when we put those on things that we don't share, that we don't have a cognitive equivalency for. And now there's this disequilibrium between us rather than an equilibrium, right? That we're out of sync with each other in some sense. So I think it's a great thing. I'm glad that I expect there to be oxygen in the air when I take the breath, that there's going to be something here to support my life, right? You know, today taking the next step is it's a bridge too far for me. I'm not sure I can do that today, but I do know today that if I take a breath, that I am expecting there to be oxygen to support my life. I do know that. I do know that to be the case. So that's one thing. Then, you know, the other way is to start to look at some of these things is that we can divide our expectations into those things that are known and unknown, conscious or unconscious. We can divide them into those expectations that we could consider toxic and those that we consider nourishing. That's a nice, you know, dimension or continuum to look at some of our expectations on. I like the following one. Does my expectation enhance my contact with the world? Right? And contribute to my self-esteem and my confidence, or does it diminish my experience of self in the world and subtract from? You know, and I've got a lot of, you know, expectations that can fall into a lot of those categories that are not, you know, an appropriate and honest relationship with reality. We say that all the time, right? What's an appropriate and honest relationship with reality? Well, breathing in a situation where there's oxygen available is an appropriate and honest relationship with reality. getting on top of a building and jumping off and expecting myself to be able to fly. That's a little stretch, Berger. Now, you being the god of the highway, we'll have to have a debate about that one, Tom. I mean, some of us may think that's true. Dee Dee obviously was challenging you in it, but Roger and I might have to have a talk with Dee Dee about reinstating that title for you.
Right. Well, thank you. And by the way, I never had any authority over jumping off of buildings. That's a whole different God. I know him, but it's like that's not me. It's like
that was you.
He comes to the meetings. His name's
tall
Benny.
Buildings in a single bound. He leaps tall buildings in a single bound.
Flap your arms harder. Yeah, it's like.
So it's such a great discussion, I mean, that we're having around this stuff, because one of the other things I was just going to say before we open this up for maybe a few shares, and like I said, I don't know how long I'll be able to hang in here tonight for that part of it, but the other thing I wanted to mention is that for a while I was always interested in anthropology. Roger and I share that interest in common for a long time. I was thinking about becoming an anthropologist, and one of the things that I loved about anthropology was studying different cultures and seeing these ideas they have that were so different than our ideas, right? And the way that a culture, let's say, deals with the transition from one state to another state in that culture, like from boyhood to manhood. And that culture is called the initiation rite, or that we called it, Margaret Mead called initiation rites, right? And what were those? Well, it's interesting when anthropologists that look at some of the commonalities amongst all of those different initiation rites for males, which there are a lot more of those than for women. We'll talk about that on another day at another time. We won't go into that now. But one of the things that every initiation rite teaches the young boy, that life is going to be difficult. It's interesting. I've heard you say this before, Tom, is where do you set your expectation? If you say, if I got my feet out of bed this morning and they hit the ground and they were flat, I've conquered, I'm a success today.
Right. I call it the power of lowered expectations. Absolutely.
But what they did here was they said, look, if you set the expectation that life is going to be difficult, then when the shit hits the fan, you go, okay, now what am I going to do with this? Instead of going, oh my gosh, this shouldn't be happening. This is unfair. Oh my, what am I, you know what I mean? Instead of getting into, complaining about it and victimizing yourself by it, they prepared these young men. And you know how they helped these young men remember it? By scarring them. By creating a wound on their body where they would bleed, and then that bleeding would eventually lead to a scarring. And when that young man looks at those scars, he says, life is going to be difficult. And that's how I'm going to show up. I've often thought that the 12-step program is an initiation into life for all of us. It starts to reset our expectations about life and about how life is going to be. And that we don't need life to be a certain way to be okay. We have to be a certain way to be okay.
And we're all scarred.
And we're all scarred, and better pay attention to those scars. Don't misread them. All right. Why don't we open it up, Tom? Oh, my God.
All right.
Tom, did you want to say something before are you so moved to?
Well, the one thing which got me from what Tom was mentioning, you used a phrase "unexpected change," I think it was, versus and I'm like, well, what's an expected change?
There are lots of them. Lots of expected changes. Yeah.
Well, I think the difference is in expected changes, I have more time to worry about it, versus an unexpected change usually is like, more sudden.
not to prepare for it, but to worry about it. I identify with that, Tom. That's good.
Yeah, I've got a longer runway to build up my anxiety over. But The other piece, real quick, is that you talked about being used brave and courageous, and it's a shift, right? It's a language shift. It's a reframing. It's like, this is my life. Like, this is what I'm here for, is to experience whatever arises, you know, in the context of, you know, my relationships and my circumstances and all that. It's like, if I'm here, I might as well be curious about it and be courageous, and, you know, and you know, and stop running. You know, that's you know, that was me, just run, you know, cut and run. So you know, that just the idea that, oh, I've got some inner strengths and some inner qualities which give me the ability to hang tough and you know, stick with this thing and experience it, you know.
Right. I love the use of the phrase "might as well" in that too. It's like, I like that. I like this, the relaxed notion of that. The idea is like, well, I'm here. I'm a human on the earth, and so you know, I might as well be curious and see what I can learn about this shit.
Yeah. The other option is resist it and get steamrolled. It'll still happen anyway.
Right.
Does someone need to believe in God to successfully overcome addiction? Well, the way I like to think about what the program does, it connects us to who we really are. And what does that mean? Well, there's this incredible force in you and I, this growth force. It's the force that moved us from crawling to walking. You wanted to take those first steps. And when you fell, and you fell a lot of times, you didn't let your failures stop you. You picked yourself up, you learned from it. And how many times did you fail before you walked? You failed as many times as you needed to. You see that force, I call it a biological imperative, a psychological imperative, a spiritual imperative. It's moving you towards wholeness. It's moving you to be what you can be. Just like in the acorn is all the information it needs to become an oak tree. In you is all the information you need to become you. Become a you that can cope with life and to deal with whatever you need to deal with to be okay. And that's what I'll talk about in my new book, The 12 Essential Insights for Emotional Sobriety.